Welcome to the first part of a review for our first test. My very first question on here is, what is the level of measurement for street name? Right, street name, it just tells you specifically what street that you're on, so it gives a location, which means that this would be an ordinal level of measurement. My second one underneath it would be the level of measurement for a radio station number, right? So, it gives it a name, it certainly orders it. You can add and subtract numbers from it to get a new radio station. But a 0 for a radio station doesn't really make a specific meaning, right? Since if you put 0 on the dial, it would just give you static for that. So because of it, this will be an interval level of measurement. The third one I have here. So the January weather data set describes the high temperature in degrees Fahrenheit and low temperature in degrees Fahrenheit for Fairfield, Connecticut every day during January of 2021. According to the Old Farmer's Almanac, the high temperature in Fairfield, Connecticut on January 31st, 2021 was 19 degrees Fahrenheit, and the low temperature was 10 degrees Fahrenheit. We want the sample z-score for the high temperature on January 31st, 2021, and the low temperature, the z-score for the low temperature on January 31st, 2021. So let me open up that data set, and that would be this one. So in order for us to do that calculation, I'm going to do this specifically in Excel. So what we are going to type for this, we are going to take the specific value that we are going to use for the high temperature of 19 degrees and subtract the average of the high temperatures. So high temperatures in the C column here. So this would be average, then in parentheses, C:(C). And that whole quantity, we're going to take that whole thing for the numerator, so it's in parentheses, divide by the sample standard deviation, so STDEV.S of that C column. So that formula will give us the z-score for the high temperature, which, according to this, gives us, rounding to 2 decimal places, as negative 3.15. For the low temperature, same spiel. It takes the low temperature, which I gave as 10, minus the average of the low temperatures, the D column here. That whole quantity divided by the sample standard deviation of that D column. So again, roughly the same aspect for that z-score. Doing so will give us this value, which is rounds to 2 decimals, negative 2.56. So let me put that down on the document here. So this was negative 3.15 and negative 2.56. So the interpretation on it would be the z-score for the January 31st high temperature. Is negative 3.15. While for the low one, the low temperature, this would be the z-score for the January 31st January 31st low temperature is negative 2.56. And the third part for this question We want to know which temperature from January 31st, 2021 is warmer relative to its distribution. Right, so, if we were to attempt to graph that just to give an idea of what that means, right, with the 0 being right here, roughly in the middle, the low temperature z-score would be a little over 2 standard deviations, so let's say here. Well, the high one would be even further to the left, let's say here. So the one that's warmer relative to its distribution would be the low temperature. So this would be the low temperature. And why is that? That is because since its z-score is higher. Let me know if you have any questions or concerns about the 3 that we just did. Be on the lookout for part 2, and I'll see you in the next one. Thank you.